Tokyo DisneySea is the most beautifully themed and richly detailed theme park in the world, but when you have ride buildings as stunning as this, you'd better have something great inside. DisneySea is also home to some of the best Disney rides ever made, and what makes Disney rides stand out from rides at other theme parks? The stories, the settings, and the animatronics. In this video, we're going to count down the top 10 animatronics at Tokyo DisneySea to show you the best of the best that Disney has to offer. An often overlooked experience at Tokyo DisneySea that has been taking guests under the sea since the park opened in 2001, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea brought a concept that could be found at the Disney parks of old and brought it to life in the modern era. Utilizing a suspended ride system and bubble screens rather than actually submersing the vehicles gave them the ability to add a lot more detail and motion to the scenes without having to worry about how the water would damage and erode the sets and animatronics over time, which is what sadly happened at the Magic Kingdom version of this classic ride. Whenever I see this picture, I don't know whether to cry or scream and run away. Whilst what makes this ride special is the immersive experience of being in a small submersible that takes you through the unique settings, the vehicle even comes with an interactive element, as at certain times, the riders can use a joystick to control a spotlight, adding an extra incentive to really explore the scenes and try to discover what may be hiding in the shadows. The ride is much more reliant on sets and effects than it is on animatronic figures, but we do see a few. Towards the end of the ride, these blue anthropomorphic buddies help us escape from their once great underwater civilization with their magic crystals. An act that is shockingly similar to the plot of this movie, which came out in the same year as the park and this ride opened. Fun fact, you can also hear the soundtrack of Atlantis: The Lost Empire in the Port Discovery area of the park, but I'm getting off topic. I love seeing these cute little heads pop up towards the end of the ride, and finally seeing a full body one floating in the water as it uses its power to help us return home. It's a sweet finale for our Voyage 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and earns these fellas the number 10 spot in our list. Mysterious Island never fails to make an impression, even after seeing it hundreds of times. Whenever I walk around that corner, especially at nighttime, my jaw still hits the floor. This area is home to two rides, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which we just talked about, and Journey to the Center of the Earth. This thrilling ride inside the volcanic centerpiece of the park, Mount Prometheus, has so much to live up to. When a ride looks like this, and can be seen from all over this breathtaking park, you'd better hope that whatever is inside can make an impression, and this ride certainly does. The instant you step into the queue and see the bubbling lava, you know you're in for a treat. After a tour around Captain Nemo's findings, we dive deep into the Earth in the Terravator, are greeted by enormous machinery working hard to continue the excavation, and finally board these iconic ride vehicles, which is where the journey really begins. While the queue constantly warns riders that this is a high-speed ride over rough and rugged terrain, the ride starts very slowly, first taking us through the crystal caverns where the Technicolor rock formations seem to sing, before reaching the mushroom forest. This area is so full of life as the enormous bioluminescent mushrooms seem to dance around, alongside glowing creatures that feel familiar and yet are so unusual. This scene is absolutely full of incredible creature designs. You can really see how the designers considered what types of animals might have adapted to live so far below the surface of the Earth, whilst also giving them an endearing quality. Whilst I do love these little guys who bounce up and down through the use of a well-hidden black support beam, my personal favourites are these furry fellas eating moss. So, whilst the number 9 spot in our list is kind of for all these subterranean species, really, I'm just talking to you fuzzy buddies. Going back to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, whilst the blue crystal-wielding floaty folks we talked about earlier are our saviours and do help us out, there is another animatronic in the ride which is really unforgettable, even if it doesn't help us at all. From the moment you see its giant eye go from green to red, you know you're in trouble. Then seeing a bunch of tremendous tentacles trying to trap and torment us, before our high-tech submersible sends visible electrical shocks rippling through the enormous squid's body. You can't beat an animatronic on this kind of scale, and the way it wraps around the entire vehicle and seems to grab it makes for a highly impactful moment, so Giant Squid is getting our number 8 spot. Anyone who has visited won't be surprised to hear me say that we will come back to Mysterious Island later. But now, we're going to go over to Lost River Delta for another opening day attraction. After the success of the original version of this ride in California's Disneyland, bringing Indiana Jones Adventure over to Tokyo DisneySea was a no-brainer. Tokyo Disney Resort love using tried and tested ride systems that they know their guests will love, and they wanted thrill rides for this more adult park, so this was an easy choice. But they did make some modifications, starting with the name. Nestled in this wooded area of the park, you'll find Indiana Jones Adventure Temple of the Crystal Skull. Come to think of it, maybe this ride started the trend of really long ride names with the word adventure in them. When you enter the temple, you'll see the foreboding queue, which is an adventure in and of itself. The giant statue towering above fallen skeletons sets the tone for the dangerous epic we're about to embark upon. Once we've boarded the vehicles, we begin our search for the Fountain of Youth, but the Crystal Skull has other plans, sending us charging into the main chamber of the temple. But who is that holding the doors closed for us? Dun, 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 Indiana Jones, Indiana Jones, it's Indiana Jones. The rest of the ride sends us careening past skeletons, bugs, and traps, but the ride doesn't have a ton of actual animatronics, other than this giant snake. Indiana Jones appears 3 times in the ride, even clinging to a rope above our vehicle. These are classic humanoid animatronic figures, and the only realistic human animatronics in the park, so Indy had to make it onto our list, albeit at the number 7 spot. From a ride with very few animatronics to a ride with loads of them, let's stroll over to Arabian coast and board a boat on Sinbad's Storybook Voyage. A glorious blending of the simplistic art style and miniaturized figures of It's a Small World and the epic sets and environments of Pirates of the Caribbean, this ride is an absolute joy and always has the shortest wait in the park. Honestly, I could do a top 10 animatronics video just for this ride, but for now, I'm gonna have to pick and choose some of my favorites which stand out on this ride. Whilst the ride has some other more impressive animatronics that we'll get to later, the fluidity of the human animatronics in this ride is fantastic, and I have to give praise to all the villagers that you see in the first and last scenes. They are the perfect way to start and end the ride. Seeing all these different figures moving creates such a strong overall feeling of a bustling environment, but then as your boat slowly moves past them, you get to focus on each one individually and realize they all have their own little things going on. There's the band playing, these guys watching the little monkey holding up a banner, and my personal favorite, the shadow puppet that we first see from the audience's perspective, ends up having an actual animatronic operating it. It's so cool. As much as I'd love to give the number 6 spot to all of the villagers, if I must choose a specific human figure from this ride, it has to be Sinbad, doesn't it? He guides us through the ride with his beautiful voice while still managing to kick some ass, playing drums with some monkeys, and riding a whale, so that gets him at number 6. Speaking of the whale in Sinbad, the ride has a few notable large animatronics, which provide great contrast to the tiny little people that inhabit this fantastical world. The whale doesn't have a ton of motion, but the fact that Sinbad is up there on its back belting out the greatest song of all time is pretty impressive. Speaking of belting out great songs, another giant figure we see is, well, a giant. I love how we get a little peek at this guy's head in the dungeon before turning the corner to see his full body in all its green glory. And along with the reveal, we get to hear his booming voice singing the infectious chorus of Compass of Your Heart at a register that physically vibrates in your chest, which makes him even more endearing. This is a very impressive animatronic, as he moves a lot for his size, and I have to be honest, I was planning to give our number 5 slot to this big guy, but I think he gets enough credit, and there's actually another big animatronic earlier on in the ride that I think is more impressive. After seeing a bandit trying to crack open a giant egg, we turn to see Sinbad apprehending some other bandits as the eggs begin to hatch. Once we turn the corner, we see their enormous mother, who is flying above the boat with a bandit in her claws. I always find his hopeless expression really funny. Look at his face. And then look at the bird's face, because this thing has so much motion and looks incredible, and it's huge and suspended above us. All 3 of the big animatronics in this ride are great, but I honestly think this one is the best, so she's getting number 5 on our countdown. Next up is one that I hesitated putting in because I'm not sure it's even still there. And I know what you're thinking. Didn't you say you live in Tokyo? Don't you go there all the time? A hard yes to both of those questions, but this attraction has been closed since before the pandemic. It's still listed as being temporarily closed on the website, but after 4 years, you start to lose hope. Regular viewers of this channel will know that I'm talking about Mermaid Lagoon Theatre. This is an in-the-round show featuring puppetry, special effects, and a brilliant trapeze-like effect, which allows Ariel to swim overhead amongst props that float around her. But as well as the real-life performers, there's also a huge animatronic in the show too. In the original version of the show, there was a giant Ursula, which I really wish I could have seen. But now, or at least up until 2020, we had a King Triton, which was also very cool just because of the sheer size of the thing. If you thought the animatronics in Sinbad were big, this guy is enormous. He does lose some points for the rear projected face, as those always look a little bit weird, but the way this thing moves is very impressive for its size. I really hope we get to see him again soon, or if not, bring back Ursula again, that would rock. So, with Triton at number 4, we're now down to our top 3 animatronics in the park. This is another one that we sadly haven't seen in a while, but I'm more confident that we will soon. Hopefully once the 3-month refurb of this area is over. This is also the only animatronic on our list, other than Indiana Jones, that you can find at other Disney parks around the world. Touted as the first ever animatronic based on a toy based on a potato that can pull out its own ear and put it back in, or something? The Mr. Potato Head animatronic is a lot of fun. They nailed the movements of this iconic character, and using projections just for the eyes works really well. I was always impressed by how his lips move too. I don't know what this is exactly, but it seems like they use this technique in the animatronics for Radiator Springs Racers over in Disney California Adventure too. Not much more to say about this one other than that I hope we get to see him again soon, and that he's our number 3. This next one has such a special place in my heart, it was hard to put it at number 2, but there's no beating number 1 on the list, so this was as good as I could do with our favorite little furball. If you're familiar with the ride, you may have noticed when I talked about Sinbad's Storybook Voyage, I missed out a key character. Of course, I'm talking about Sinbad's loyal tiger cub sidekick, Chandu. From the instant you see him, you can't not fall in love with him. Then every time you see him again, you want even more to just bring him home. Thankfully, the Chandu merch is pretty good, so you probably can. Chandu appears 10 times in the ride, if you're willing to include this one, which is basically just a tail. We see him holding the map at the beginning of the journey, looking out when we're lost at sea, helping to attack the baddies when they try to steal the giant eggs, kicking even more ass when we rescue the giant himself, banging on a little drum. Look how happy he is with himself, he's doing such a good job. Next, in the monkey scene, we see him with bananas on his head. What a good boy he is. And then we see a silhouette of him before seeing him spinning around after being launched into the air by the whale's blowhole, until finally, the king of our hearts finds himself a crown and a chest of jewels. After all this, our little buddy must be exhausted, right? Well, that's why at the very end of the ride, we get one more Chandu who's fast asleep. But every time Sinbad talks, he wakes him up. Shut up, Sinbad! Chandu's trying to do little tiger sleepies. You're disturbing him. Of course, I love all my Chandus dearly, but if I had to choose a specific one from the ride, I'll go with drumming Chandu, because he just looks so happy. But that was not an easy decision to make. Chandu will always be first place in my heart, but he's number 2 on this list. Okay, before we get to number 1, I want to give an honorable mention to Shiriki Utundu in Tower of Terror. He's such an iconic character and has such a strong presence and personality in the ride, but he doesn't actually move, so he's not an animatronic. Well, I guess he does move when he disappears, but shh, that doesn't really happen. He just magically disappears. And even then, he's a static figure that moves, so I don't think it's an animatronic. Anyway, it didn't feel right not to include him in this video at all, so I just had to give a little shout out to your boy Shariks. So, we're here at number 1. Everyone who has ridden this ride knew this was going to be number 1 before they even clicked on this video, and yeah, they were right. There's just no way you can't put this at the number 1 spot. Remember I said we'd get back to Mysterious Island? Well, back on Journey to the Center of the Earth, after the wonderful bioluminescent mushroom forest we talked about earlier, we discover some eggs. Now, if we didn't already learn from Sinbad, don't go near giant eggs unless you want the wrath of a giant mama. Well, mamas don't get much bigger than this one. After seeing lava pouring down one side of the vehicle and an eruption of flames on the other, we come face to face with the most impressive and intimidating animatronic, possibly of all time. Lava Mama is a beast. Something this huge and imposing has no right to be as fluid and detailed as this. Not to mention the subtle complementary movements it has in its claws and face. The glowing green eyes make you feel like this is the last pair of eyes you'll ever see. And then before you know it, your vehicle has darted out a good few hours quicker than it would take you to fully appreciate this monster. Originally, Imagineers even wanted this thing to pop out of the ground like a jack-in-the-box, but the force that it would have required would have caused structural damage to the entire volcano building. Thankfully, Imagineers learned their lesson and never again built a giant animatronic monster in a fake mountain that would move in a way that caused structural damage to the building it was in. That's the Yeti in Expedition Everest. I'm talking about the Yeti at Animal Kingdom that doesn't move anymore. You know what does move? This thing! It moves your entire mode of being. Once you've seen this thing, your life will never be the same again. So maybe you're thinking of booking a trip soon to see some of these incredible animatronics. Or maybe you already have a trip booked, but you're still not sure which park you should visit or where you should spend your extra day. This video will answer all of your questions about which of the 2 parks at Tokyo Disney Resort is the one for you. If you want personalized trip planning advice, you can get in touch with me through Patreon or arrange a one-to-one call. You'll find the links for those in the description.